Hi everyone, my name is Maddie Resnick and welcome to SDR Insider, Insights from Top Performers. I'm excited about this podcast not only as a host, but also as a current senior SDR myself. Sales is ever-changing, and that's why we wanted to start a project that interviews top performers, both at our company and beyond, to share success stories. I was thrilled when our marketing team brought this idea to my attention because I actually started my own blog with the same energy of peer-to-peer interviews and storytelling over the pandemic for postgrads. As an extension of each episode, we will be publishing a blog post with key takeaways. I look forward to sharing stories and knowledge with old and new sales reps through the SDR Insider. Enjoy! Well, I'm so excited that our first guest for SDR Insider is going to be Bhuvana today. We worked together at Demand Drive, and we actually started around the same time, which is actually interesting because we haven't been on the same projects or spent a lot of time together, but she has really great insights, so I really couldn't think of a better person to start off this podcast with. So Bhuvana, I'm going to just have you explain a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in being an SDR and, that process. I'd love to hear it from your perspective, and also just to get anyone listening to get a little bit of more information about you, I think would be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I'm just overjoyed to be even doing a podcast and just talking about such an important subject, I feel. We were talking about this, and we kind of felt like there were not a lot of conversations happening between SDRs and just kind of running down what the day-to-day looks like within SDR world because it's always changing. So I think this conversation is just, helpful for everyone, but more so helpful for me because we're in that work every single day.
Yeah, I think it's awesome that, we're able to have these conversations like as a peer-to-peer. I know we're not in school anymore, so peer isn't the right word, but colleagues to colleagues having conversations about work we're actually doing, I think is going to be really cool. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely. The pleasure is mine. But in terms of like getting into the SDR world or how I kind of came to, draw a lot of interest into this type of world was I was always sort of interested in a client-facing role. I've always been interested in understanding what people's problems or what gaps they're facing in their process, what that sort of looked like. And I've always loved somehow in some way strategically aligning that with a solution or a way in which we can solve that problem, right? And coincidentally, like during my MBA, I had done a few internships where I'd worked alongside SaaS companies, B2B tech companies, and I had sort of grown an affinity working in the tech space itself, because I feel like the tech industry in and of itself exists to solve a lot of gaps and, a lot of problems facing that people face in any industry. So those are the two things that I was essentially looking for when I had graduated, was more of a client-facing role, working in the tech industry. I felt like what I'd receive a lot of learning out of, and that's sort of how I found Demand Drive. And through the interview process, those are the two things that I had immediately taken away, was that I'd be working alongside B2B tech clients, and another thing was that, everyone started out the same. Everyone in Demand Drive does, at one point, they did the sales work and, they got to where they are right now. And that's really inspiring when you consider who runs the company, right? So
I agree.
Dan and Lindsay, yeah. So at one point, Dan and Lindsay, Demand Drive, they started off as SDRs, and now it amassed into a full-fledged company with amazing clientele. So that's very inspiring for me. And, what I took from that was that there's not only a lot of learning opportunity working alongside tech clients, but there's also a lot of growing opportunity within the company. And I'd be supported and encouraged to do so as well.
I completely agree. I think we're super lucky we landed where we have. So cheers to us. But yeah, I think that, the SDR role is definitely something that was a big question mark for me personally when I started. I didn't really understand exactly what it was. So maybe for someone who doesn't really know what the SDR role entails, and it is different for every client and company, I would love to hear just some strengths and skills that you found super helpful that you have that were really helpful when you first started the role. And maybe someone listening who has similar skills can relate and say, hey, I might be good at sales or doing an SDR role. Would love to hear like some of those strengths and skills that, you picked up on right away.
Yeah, I feel like generally within the SDR world or within the sales world in general, as a sales professional, I think it's important to build up on skills like objection handling, communication, and clear and concise communication that really helps when you're talking to C-level executives. Confidence is another thing. So I think there are a lot of soft skills that I feel are very important for any person who's, wanting to come into the sales world. I think it just comes down to like communication. I think at the end of the day, also your ability to be coachable. Because I think the SDR world, the sales world in and of itself, like you said, it means something different from client to client. So there's a lot of learning and unlearning that comes with that process. As long as you're willing to kind of get down and like research, do the research and understand what the tech does, what your company does, what their vision is like, who are you trying to reach out to, how do I talk to this person, and learning as much as you can. I think learning with knowledge comes power, and I think the more knowledge you have, the more powerful you are. So I think for me, it comes down to that. The more that I learn, even if I don't know the subject or even if I don't know exactly the industry that my client operates in, I can always learn about it. And
for sure. Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, like our backgrounds are different. Like you spoke about having your MBA and, being on the more business side of things. And my background is more on the communication side of things. And so it really goes to show, regardless of where you start, I think, an SDR role and learning about sales and all of that great stuff is so important in your career, wherever it might go. But especially, it just goes to show we all start at the same place, regardless of where we come from, the backgrounds we have. And I think that, that's something really cool about the SDR role. Like we've all done the research. We all have to be coachable. We have to have the same skills to be able to be a good SDR. Regardless of our backgrounds. So I think it's really cool to hear you say that. So I will ask, just because, as I mentioned, when I started the SDR role, I wasn't really sure exactly what it was. Would love to hear kind of what you thought it was and, what it is now and kind of the differences, and also maybe some things you wish you had known when you had started the role. Maybe in hindsight, it would have been helpful to know a little bit more about sales and also the SDR role in general.
I think initially starting out, going in, especially with my interview process, I had known that I think it's just based off of those two things that I had initially wanted, was being able to network and speak with people who are looking for some way to solve a certain challenge that they're facing. So that was something that I had previous experience with just in business development prior to Demand Drive. So I knew that I was going to be doing a lot of that, and that's something that transferable that I knew that I could bring into this role. It was just more so about, learning about what is this client? My first client was in healthcare technology. So, what is healthcare technology? Why do people need it? What are the gaps that people are facing that, needs to be solved so that they can be, have more time to do other things, and have more menial tasks covered and taken care of. That was sort of what my first client entailed. So just kind of understanding the world that, your client revolves in and kind of being able to speak the language and being able to cater to that messaging on an everyday basis was something that I already knew a little bit about prior to, just because I knew the world of, when you're reaching out to people, that is something that's required. You need to be able to speak their language. But I think what I didn't know about the role, and kind of what I had learned when I was just sort of in the motions and working day to day, was I think the flexibility of working alongside a client and having to be flexible, having to be adaptable. I think I touched on, the process changes a lot, when you're working with a client, or it may not, but in a lot of my situations, process changes. There are new tools that you're getting introduced to right in the middle of, when you've already kind of done a lot of, traction, and you're used to doing a certain thing in a certain way. So I think it's just more so like learning and unlearning those things so that you can implement new sales tools or new messaging or a new understanding of your product so that it's more updated and it's more, you can communicate that to your prospects. So that's something that I had learned on the go. So that is one of them.
I think that's a huge piece too, just that I picked up on what you just said. I think that a lot of people think when they start a job, especially an SDR who's starting, at the beginning of their sales career, they think they have to know everything, and that really is not true. You really just have to be adaptable, coachable, be interested in whatever your client is doing, and be able to do the research. I think that's really what's most important. I started in the medical space too, and I think that I was a little overwhelmed because I was like, how am I supposed to know all of this? I don't know all of this. And you realize quite quickly that isn't the job. The job isn't to know everything, because no one's expected to know everything, especially when they're starting off in sales. But it's to have conversations and be adaptable, be curious. And I think all of those things really help you just be the best SDR and, sales representative you can be.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's just adding on to that, being able to speak up, ask questions early on was what really helped me kind of overcome that hurdle, because it can be overwhelming. And from my experience, I know I've reached out to my managers and team members so many times saying that I don't know how to use, Salesforce. I don't know how to, make calls, or I don't know how to, maybe even analyze a certain call that I had with a certain prospect, and how do I, note down all the key important details of that call, right? So there are a lot of things that, you can always rely on your managers and your team members to kind of show you the ropes a bit, and it kind of takes that overwhelming feeling out, because it kind of simplifies all the things that you're kind of faced with at front, and kind of lays it out in a way where it's oh, it's manageable. I'm taken care of. Now I know how to do this. So that was something that I had quickly gone into.
For sure. I totally agree with that. And I know we talked a little bit about, how we both felt when we started this position as an SDR. We wish we would have known a little bit more about the high highs and the low lows. So I'd love for you to just kind of talk a little bit about that, because I know personally that was something I was not ready for, and I didn't really know what to expect. I think when you start off on a new project or with a new client, it can go one or two ways. It can go really great, or it can be a little bit more difficult. And, you have some months in sales where it's really great and some months where it's not. And so I'd love for you to just speak on that a little bit, and how any new rep listening, if they are experiencing, some highs and some lows, how to balance that and just keep yourself more centered, I think would be a cool thing to just hear from your perspective.
Yeah, that's actually very important, especially as a sales professional. You learn very quickly that, the highs, like you said, the highs are very high. You feel very elated when you get those leads and meetings in. But then you do have periods of, time periods where you go without getting anything, So I think those times, it's normal to feel that oh, am I doing my job wrong? Or am I not a good SDR? Am I not a good sales professional? It's very normal to think that way. And I think what I've learned in those times is that those, they say that, smooth seas don't make skilled sailors, right? So
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I really do believe that, because I think in those times where it gets challenging, it gets difficult to get the results that you're looking for, whether it's, opportunities uncovered, meetings booked, whatever it means for your clients. I think the back end work is just as important. I think when I worked with clients, yes, the lead is important, the meetings are important, but I think the intel into why we're not getting meetings is just as important. When we're talking, because I think we're the face of the company in essence, because we're the frontline people. We're the ones who's kind of face to face with the prospects, we're understanding what their needs and their challenges are, they can kind of tell us, like, oh, that's not actually a challenge that we're facing. This is a challenge that we're facing. Is that something that you cater to? And, in some of my clients or some of my projects, they might be new products where they don't cater to that specific challenge yet, but that's something that my client needs to know so that they can keep updating the product so that it's ready for the market or that it's ready to solve a certain challenge that our prospects are facing. Or maybe it's a certain objection that you're getting a lot and you don't know how to tackle that yet. That's something that clients would like to hear as well, so that they might have specific messaging that could be helpful for you to use when you're face-to-face with the prospect as well. A lot of the back-end work, I think, is important at that time. Even keeping yourself organized, CRM hygiene, just being able to even stay organized in a time that feels very silent, or, you're putting in all the work, just being able to know, like, oh, okay, like, I know what I'm going to be doing today. I know what I have to do at hand. My goal is a meeting, but, these are all the tasks that I can control and that I can get done. And I know that I'm doing the right work. And if not, I can get to know what the right work is, and make those changes.
I agree with everything you said. And I think that quote is an awesome one for new sales reps to think about. I'll share my experience with that. I think that when I started, I was booking meetings fast and, it was ramping up. I was so excited. And, I actually learned more from a time I experienced after that, where I was struggling a little more to book meetings because I had to do more of the back end work, and I had to really do that research and figure out why what I was doing wasn't working. And I think that has really helped me through almost like the 2 years now of being in the sales rep position, because I've been able to figure out what works and doesn't work, like you were saying, and bringing that back to my client and things like that. So I know we talked a little bit about organization and things like that, but I'm just curious if there are any resources that you find especially helpful that you wish you knew about when you had first started the role. I know we want to talk about LinkedIn. I know you and I are both big advocates of that. But yeah, I would love to hear just your thoughts around any resources that you would really recommend for new reps to embrace.
Yeah, I think honing in on what resources you have available, especially when you're working on a project, is very important. Earlier, the better. I think LinkedIn is a really great resource if you can use it, whether you have Sales Navigator or, like a normal LinkedIn profile. I think you can use either one to your advantage.
For sure.
LinkedIn is a great resource. I am a huge advocate of LinkedIn. We both are. And I think we even talked about how apprehensive we were.
Oh, for sure.
In the beginning, just because it seemed kind of daunting, right? Like, why would I go up to a stranger and message them or anything like that? But I think it's actually a funny story, because like I was on a project where it was kind of silent, and we were not really getting a lot of traction. We were not getting a lot of quality conversations going. And at that time I was just like, all right, let me try LinkedIn. And I had, set up some specific messaging. In with like C-level executives and in a certain industry. So once I had that going, I started to see so many people within that specific industry being so vocal about the work that they do. They post a lot. They give their thoughts and opinions on whatever is happening in that industry. They might even have their own blogs themselves, because they're such advocates and champions for that specific space and that specific work. And it made it almost easier for me to reach out to them, because why wouldn't I? Because I would generally want to have a conversation with a person who is someone who's, an advocate for that line of work, who knows readily what challenges and what gaps that they're facing in the industry. So it kind of makes it easier, because you can see it all right there on their profile. Everything is transparent. You can see their face. You can put a face to the name, and they can do that short and well. So it makes.
Oh, I agree. I think that, like you were saying, it's a little daunting, like just to, reach out to people before you even know who they are or they know who you are. But I also think it goes back to, something we were talking about earlier, which is once you start, it kind of gets a little bit easier. You kind of just have to like crack the code, and then it gets a little easier. So once you start reaching out to people and you hear a response because maybe you figure out the right messaging or whatever it might be, once you start getting those answers, you are more inclined to want to reach out more. I know that was my experience. The first time I had someone respond to me on LinkedIn for my client, I was so excited, and it was a positive response, and I was booking the meeting right away. And I think it gave me the confidence to do it a little bit more. And so I would definitely recommend to anyone just starting off. LinkedIn is your friend. You're not being weird or creepy. I think that sometimes is the perception too. Like, how did these people find me? And, they're finding me on LinkedIn, but it is a tool. And it's a tool that you should definitely use, because the sooner you use it, the more meetings you can book and the more relationships you can build. And like you were saying, the more you can learn about the industry.
Yeah, I think it's like, I call it like the single source of truth. You can find any information that you need, whether it's about your prospect, whether it's about the company, or whether it's about that industry at large. Because you can see, like, in a tumultuous time that we're in right now, people are moving in and out of companies, so even that information too, like who's left the company within the last 6 months and who's just joined the company within the last 6 months. Valuable information, which you don't easily get if you're working through like a CRM or a list of some sort. That's like quality research and like quality information that you can use on the phone or in an email, and also like LinkedIn messages.
For sure. LinkedIn is your friend, and we should view it as such. I love LinkedIn, and I think it's definitely a resource that it took me a while to really hone into, and I'm mad at myself. I wish I did it sooner. And then also what's cool about it too is you see who's connected to who. So once you start kind of growing your own network for whatever space you're in with your client, I think you start seeing more of the connections and people who might have worked with other people, and it kind of just all starts making sense. And I really think it's something I wish I started using sooner, but I'm glad I'm using it now.
Yeah.
Other than LinkedIn, are there any other resources that, have really helped you? Or would you say that's like the big one you would say for people just starting out, just definitely to utilize?
I think, something that goes hand in hand with LinkedIn, talking about like networking, when you've just joined a company, I think it's also important, like, and I think we slightly touched on this, is just relying internally as well. Just
for sure,
honing in on the resources that are available to you internally within your company is important.
You're not on an island, like you have people to help you. Yeah. And I think, not to like cut you off, but I really think that's important, because I think, when you're starting and you're brand new, you think you're kind of on this island alone, but through your client and through, the company you work for and the other sales reps, you really can start to see how things connect. And so it is important to, outside of just LinkedIn and everything that's going on in the computer, talk to the people on your team, because they have insight too. And who knows, they might have worked your territory or something like that. So it's good to just like have those relationships outside of just, on the computer and on LinkedIn and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think the number of times that I've leaned on my team members, just because there's a lot of learning, because sales is not an exact science. There's not like a silver bullet that works across the board. I wish there was. But I do. Yeah, it's always a learning experience, right? There's a certain like process that I could kind of observe my team member doing that, like, oh, I never knew I could phrase the product in that way. Let me try that, or hey, I didn't even know I could, like do double dials, or if that's the process that they've been working with a long time and that has fetched them success, like I'm going to try that too. So there's a lot of learning that we can kind of get off of one another. Like there's a lot of knowledge sharing that can go on between teams, and putting yourself in a space where you can collaborate and learn off of. I think that's an immense resource that you could utilize right in the beginning. That's going to set yourself up for success for sure.
I completely agree. And kind of going off of that, for anyone who is just starting out as an SDR or in the sales world, is there any memory that comes to mind for you that maybe was challenging or maybe funny, whatever it might be? This is something that I really want to ask each of our guests, because like you said, everyone has their own process, but as well as that, they also have their own stories to share. And so I'm sure you have a few stories that come to mind, either positive or negative, but regardless of if they were positive or negative, they do help you grow. So I would love to hear that. And also, I'm sure anyone listening who is newer would love to hear it as well, just to, see that everyone has different experiences and that it's not all just going to be point A to point B. There's sometimes a bunch in there to get to the end game.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that came to my mind when we were talking about the highs are high and the lows are low, and just that time period of like where, we kind of have to like hustle hard, but we might not reap a lot. What I have to say to that, I feel like there is a point where you do. I think that hard work that we do, that back end work that we do with the research and the messaging and pivoting strategies as much as we can, it does reap rewards sooner than later, the more that we invest in that back end work, right? And that just, I had a story for that where my first client, this is probably like within the first couple weeks that I had joined my first ever project at Demand Drive. And we had set up our goals and what we had to kind of accomplish by the end of the quarter. And I think we had to reach, some 30,000, desktops where the product had to be implemented, right? So that number just seemed like a very daunting number to me. And I like any new person joining in the company, let alone a sales professional, would kind of feel a little intimidated. So I was just like, let me do as much work as I can. I was researching, I was building up my messaging as much as possible. I was even practicing in front of a mirror. So like I can like talk in front of a prospect or a C-level executive or an owner of a business. I was just prepping myself as much as I can so that, I would be in a better position to book those meetings and bring those opportunities for my client, right? And I remember the first set of calls that I was on, I kind of connected with a manager at a specific healthcare company, pretty big company. And I remember we were on the phone. It was a really great conversation, qualified them right then and there. And it was also an easy conversation. That person was also very nice and sweet on the phone.
Those are the best.
Those are the best. I love the easy conversations. And it's nice because when you can be kind of personable on the phone and they're also, you kind of realize they're also human too. But then I asked him, I was like, how many desktops do you guys have within the organization? And he said 17,000. So I was just kind of elated just because that number that we had to accomplish right before I started the program was a very daunting number. And I knew that like this required a lot of the work. I didn't know if I was going to reach that 30,000, definitely not by myself, but I never knew that there would be a call or a conversation I would have with some manager at XYZ company that would lead to me possibly getting, more than half of our quarterly goal. So that was something that initially, it kind of reminded me of that specific incident. It was very early on too. So I think it kind of reminded me of a quote. I'm big on quotes.
Where I love a good quote.
It's really motivating. Where a certain person told me, hard work puts you where good luck can find you. So I think hard work is necessary, but I also do think, it sets us up in a good place where we can be lucky, where we can find those needles in a haystack or that diamond in the haystack opportunities for our clients. So that's always been my experience is whenever you're in that low period, do as much work as you can, learn more, do more, be more of a resource to your client, be more of a valuable asset in terms of the information that you bring along to your client, because that's inevitably going to set you up for success and getting those opportunities. So that's what I think.
Wow, I love that story. And I think having like those little wins, but in this case, it was a big win. It was 17,000 computers, or desktops. It's a big win, but it's big or small, regardless of what it is. I think you really have to hold on to those in the beginning and remind yourself like, okay, there are going to be good conversations. Even if there's a bad conversation, for every bad conversation, there's a good conversation. And so I think just holding on to those things are really important, and they do like kind of push you to keep going and wanting to succeed. And so I think you just have to remind yourself consistently. And I think that would probably be my main takeaway is that, when you're starting off in sales, prepare yourself for high highs, and there's also going to be low lows. But additionally, there's a lot in the middle. Most days are more mundane. Most days are going to be doing the hard work, doing the research to get to those high highs. And in order to get to those high highs, if you have to have some low lows, that's okay, because it all is helping you get to your end goal. And I think that, just remember that everything works itself out and balances itself out, especially if you're doing the work, like you had said from the beginning of this conversation, how important it is to do the research and do the work. And if you do that, there is no way you're going to fail, because you're doing the work, you're doing what you're supposed to do. And yes, some people get lucky, but that only lasts for so long. You have to do the work too.
Sustainable, right? So
yes,
what you said is really important, because I think to build lasting relationships with your clients, you have to show them that you're invested. And even in the times where it's not so, where there's not a lot of traction, but you're showing them that you're invested by putting in the work, you're revamping the messaging, you're listening to what people are saying, you're invested in how the industry is operating, and you're bringing that feedback back to your clients. That's helpful for them, because we can use that to pivot strategies, and that just shows a client that you're invested in kind of making this program succeed to the best of your ability. And that's what I agree.
I love it. And I would love to know, so I think my takeaway from everything we've talked about and what you've said is just, finding the work ethic in the middle, in the mundane, between the high highs and the low lows. I think that's where you can really shine and show your value. So I would love to know, just from everything we just talked about, is there anything that you would say, if you take anything away from this episode, you would want someone to take away from?
Yeah, I would just kind of going along the lines of what you said, just being able to focus on the work that you can control. So I would tell everyone to not get discouraged by the low periods, because I feel like those are the periods that hones every sales professional, every SDR. Those periods are where we truly grow and we truly learn how to do our best work. We learn new ideas, we learn new strategies. We finally get on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
That it pushes us, and it pushes us to do something new, try something creative, and reach out in a different way. And that's ultimately gonna always help us in the long term, where we do put ourselves in a position where we can reap those leads or reap those meetings and reap the results that our clients expect.
I love that. I think that's a great way to end our conversation, because I think it's a huge takeaway. And I'm just so excited you were our first guest. And I think everyone's going to love hearing your insight and just learning a little bit more about where you started and now you're being so successful. And I think it's awesome to see the trajectory and talk about the high highs and the low lows. I think people are going to love it. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.